Welcome to Writing Black Joy Season 3. I'm Sophia Robinson, and I'm a story listener, a writing coach, an editor, as well as the producer of Writing Black Joy, a virtual space that celebrates, centers, and promotes the voices of Black writers and storytellers with joyful and uplifting stories. Here, you'll find conversations with some of my favorite Black writers and storytellers, learn more about their projects and the joy they're bringing into the world, hear more about their creative processes, and find inspiration for your own creative ventures, as well as tips and strategies for writing poetry, blogs, creative nonfiction, fiction, plays, and so much more from all types of writers, as well as a sneak peek into the writing life. You could even find your next favorite writer, book, poem, play, or blog. And if you're a Black writer who is looking for a coach or an editor to help you bring your joyful story into the world, then click on my website below to find out how to work with me. In the meantime, let's go to today's guest. Welcome back to Writing Black Joy. I hope you have been enjoying this season as much as I have. And today, another awesome guest, Nacala Ayele. Now, Nacala is a fellow coach. Sorry about the noise. Outside my place is so noisy, and this is like the 15th time I've recorded this, so I'm not going back. Sorry. So let's get back to Nacala. So Nacala was born and raised in Seattle, and she is a joy coach, right? So we talk a bit about her coaching, but we also talk about this project that she's created where she's featuring Black elders and their stories of joy. So let me just tell you a little bit about her. So Nacala, as I said, was born and raised in Seattle, Washington. She comes to coaching from a background of art, healing, service, and community organizing. Nacala believes that joyful people who operate from their own genius have the power to transform not only themselves, but their families, communities, and the world. She is committed to centering the experiences of Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities and helping her clients design their lives around the things that bring them the most joy. Nacala and I talk about her work as a joy coach for Black and Indigenous clients, her project, Like Fine Wine, Black Joy Over Time, how she and her videographer sought to ensure a people-first attitude within the project, the myth of objectivity, her upcoming venture to learn more about recording oral histories from Black elders, being a good steward of the stories of others, her own joyful stories, and so much more. I hope you enjoy our conversation as much as I did. Hey everyone, welcome back to Writing Black Joy. Today I have Nacala with me. You will have heard her bio before we started. And Nacala is a fellow coach that I know from my coach training back in the day. And she's also all about Black Joy. So welcome, Nacala. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so excited about just hanging out with you. I love that you are all about writing Black joy and just hearing about the necessity of joyful Black stories from your perspective as someone in the African diaspora that hasn't, from your particular perspective. It's so dope. I love it.
Yeah, and I love yours as well. So let us start with you tell us a bit about, so just before we hit record, this always happens, the juicy stuff starts before we hit record, and I'm like, let's hit record quick, because I want to, let's just have the conversation on live. So tell us a bit about what you do, but I also want to hear about your project, right? So you are, obviously, you have your project, Like Fine Wine, Black Joy Over Time. Listen, anybody, I'm going to put links to this project in the show notes. It's so good. But you're also a joy coach. So tell us about what you do and your project. Tell us everything.
Great. So I am a joy coach. I'm a joy actualization coach for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And I'm African American. And, the stories that are recorded in our country are those of trauma and tragedy, right? And so going back to, well, separate things. So that's going into the project. Me as a coach, I'm a joy coach,
Mm-hmm.
and I really work on helping folks to identify and realign to the thing that makes them the most magical. The premise of my work is that because of slavery and colonialism, black folks and other folks of color have had not only our bodies and our lands taken from us in service of white supremacy, but we've also had our gifts and our talents taken. And so generationally, we have internalized that trauma by overgiving in all the places. We overgive at home, we overserve in our communities, and then we farm our just amazing talents out to work environments where we're made to feel like we don't belong. And so we then have none of our own goodness for ourselves. And so in my one-on-one coaching I practice, my work is around reorienting the focus of our gifts and talents so that we as individuals become the first beneficiaries of our own gifts.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the private practice, and I do that work through one-on-one coaching and also through joy planning workshops and just helping folks identify what is that thing that makes you the most magical, and how can we allow the things in your life to form around that, and supporting and nurturing that rather than you like just pushing yourself into all these environments and giving. So the project. So this project started off as a Black History Month project. Do y'all have Black History Month where y'all are at? Okay. Is it February as well?
So in Barbados, we have African Awareness Month. That's in February. In the UK, there is Black History Month, but it's in November. So varies.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay. Dope. I didn't even occur to me to think about that until now. But yeah, so Black History Month we have in February. And I was like considering my business content for that month last year, 2022. And I said, it's Black History Month. I should probably do some content. And I was thinking about what I'm accustomed to seeing in Black History Month, and that is slavery. Maybe you have inventors that, like Charles Drew was a doctor who was a just brilliant doctor who created the process for plasma transfusions,
Yep.
right? Died in a car crash because they refused to give him the procedure that he created. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So like that's Black History Month. And I was like, I can't. I'm a joy coach. What can I create that is joyful content for Black History Month? And so I was like, okay, I have elders that I grew up with, so that brings the history. If I ask them about joyful experiences that they've had in the course of their lifetime, that brings the joy. Bam, that's great. I'll have 28 days of content. I'll ask 28 elders, five questions about how they've experienced joy in the course of their lifetime and what advice they would give to the community about joy. Well, the answers started coming back, and I was like, oh, wow, this is way bigger than me. It is way bigger than them. This needs to be a bigger deal than I'm making it. It's way more significant than just using a snippet of their life story for content for my business. So then I was like, in doing some of these uh, interviews over Zoom, I was like, okay, I want to create an opportunity to record these stories beautifully. I want beautiful lighting, I want makeup, I want sound, professional sound, I want a Black film crew. And then, maybe we can give the elders honorariums for their time and for their stories. And then maybe I can put together a gift package, and maybe I can bring them food, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe it's a whole experience, right? And so I did. I wrote grants and got funding to hire a Black and brown film crew to come into these elders' homes or their environments of their choice, right? And just created these stunning recordings of these joy narratives. And so now I have people tapping me like, okay, you need to make sure that you record this person and this person. And hey, I want to be a part of your project. Why didn't you ask me? And I was like, well, you didn't respond to my email. Or you're right, I should have, invite. Well, the people who are asking me personally why I didn't invite them are people that I actually did invite, and they just didn't get it, right. And then also just thinking about technology and elders. And
Yeah,
initially, when I wrote these, the idea was to recreate in the digital world my experience of coming up in Seattle, Washington, which is, so we are in the Pacific Northwest. We are in the northwest corner of the contiguous US, right? So we're up by Canada. We're just 2 hours away from Canada, 2 hour drive. And it's a bubble where, for my all of my 44 years, when I tell people outside of Seattle that I'm from Seattle, they're like, there are Black people there? And it's like, yeah. And when I grew up, there were way more. There were probably twice as many Black folks. But that doesn't mean that there's a lot of us. There are a very little of bit of us, but we were all in one place when I was
your
growing up.
community.
So
Yeah,
like I could walk in my neighborhood, I could walk, about a mile and hit all these Black businesses and, places where you could just, community centers where you could just pop in and there'd be elders and all this intergenerational transfer of information and knowledge. And it was so beautiful. And that is gone, like it's totally gentrified. In that neighborhood, you can't really tell that there were Black people there in a lot of ways. So I was like, how do we digitally bring together young people to be able to hear these stories? And so the original focus audience was younger Black folks. But then I realized that it was ridiculous to do a project that centered elders and not have elders be part of the target audience
of
for
course.
this, because they want to see their age mates. They want to see the friends that they grew up with or knew back in the 70s when they moved to Seattle. You know what I mean? So like um so then that changed things too in terms of like, who do I now invite to these events?
Mm,
Who do I now make sure that they get the link? So
yeah.
yeah, that's the project. Okay, oh, so there was the recording of it. And so now there are the hybrid events that convene in a public, not a public place, but they convene in a venue of the elder's choice, but usually a Black community
Hmm.
uh, center, or a center where Black folks gather. And then there is like, an opening libation, pouring of libation, or an opening prayer, whatever the elder's specific spiritual preference of opening, right? So we do a spiritual opening and an introduction of the project, and then we play the elders video, and then there's a joyful inquiry where folks get to ask the elders questions pertaining to the video, and then there is a give back appreciation,
Oh,
where everyone gets to say how much they appreciate the elder who is being celebrated in this particular thing. So they've become these beautiful, beautiful events that have been really special. And the elders are just like, they talk about kind of it like transforming how they're looking at their futures.
mm,
You know what I mean? And these are folks that are like 65 and 78 that are like, okay, so now as I'm, entering this stage of my adulthood and my elderhood, after having this experience of reflecting on my joy in my lifetime,
hmm.
what does that look like for my future joy?
Going forward,
And
yeah.
so it's so real. It's been beautiful.
I love that. This sounds so good. I have like a million questions, always millions of questions. Um,
Yeah, give them to me.
one of the things I wanna like one of the strings I want to pull at, you talked about pouring the libation. That's something that we do in Barbados as well. And I met a guy yesterday who is from South Africa, and he was talking about some food that they eat. And I was like, yeah, we have that in Barbados, but we call it this, and they have it in Jamaica, and they call it that, and it's always just mind blowing to me, the connections, not just within the diaspora, but like even back to like some of the African countries. So when you said that, it was like, oh, that just makes me happy.
Oh, that is a whole thing, right? So, you know, enslaved. So when we were being stolen from Africa, right? There was an intentionality on white folks' part of filling ships with people from different places so that they could
Mm.
communicate,
Yeah.
right? And then if you made it through the Middle Passage, beating your language out of you, beating your spirituality out of you, beating all of the things that they could that tied you to Africa. So the fact that there are places where we have either retained practices or have gone back to Africa to learn the practices and bring them back to our communities is just stunning. It's
It's just mind
stunning
blowing.
that we have been able to do that,
Yeah,
right?
that
And
is.
even when it's and even when we don't know we're doing it, like, I
Mm.
grew up, in the 90s with, everybody's pouring out a little liquor for the dead homie, you know what I mean? And
Yep,
like
that's right.
not understanding that that is like very African, that it can't get
Very.
no more African than that, right?
No, you can't. That is
So
so true. Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. Oh, so many ways you can go. One thing I'm curious about. You talked a little bit, and we'll talk about this a bit, but then I wanna turn back to the project. But we were talking a bit earlier about your business, and I know you were saying ironically, that when you started this project, you were thinking about content, social media content for your business during Black History Month. And earlier, even before we hit record, we were talking a bit about connecting the pieces of your sort of work to your business. And I was, I'm curious about this because and this is something that if anybody who's listening to this episode, if you haven't heard like my solo episode, which is going to be the first episode of the season, go back and have a listen to it because I'll talk a bit more about why I'm sort of putting a pause on the season. But I'm doing the opposite. I'm trying to disconnect it because I feel like when I started this podcast, I was also coaching writers and I was doing editing, and I still do that, but writing Black Joy was never supposed to be about writing. And at the time, I thought I could just push all these ideas together and it would be great. And it didn't work because it turned it into this different thing that I wasn't expecting it to be. And yeah, so I'm curious. Well, this is just conversation. Like, what are your thoughts around making that connection to your business? Why is it important to you to do that? I know you, and I want to talk a little bit about your recent application and the program that you're starting soon. And like, so, and I firmly believe that we are they say we are legion. We're multiple people. We don't just have one aspect to us, and I think there's nothing wrong with a business being that way. But I'm curious your thoughts around like bringing it all together, and what are you thinking about that? I'm really curious.
okay, so I spend a lot of time on a project that is actually costing me money and
Mm-hmm.
not bringing money in
Yeah.
necessarily,
Oh, absolutely.
right?
Same
And
with
so right, and so like I'm hoping that, and the idea again was that this this project, back in the time that it was just content for the business, there was the idea that I would use it to promote my business. And then people would be like, oh, that's really cool. Joy. I want more joy. I want a joy coach. I want to do a workshop. I want you to come talk to my folks. You know what I mean? And so, like, that was the idea. And
Mhm.
so, but what's happening is that people, excuse me, are now knowing me for oral history, which is amazing, right?
Yeah.
But they're not asking about how they can give me money for my business
Yeah. Yeah.
necessarily. And so, but I mean, well, I should say black folks are not, black and brown folks are not like people
Mhm.
who I would now. There are local newspapers that serve our community that are not necessarily black run all the way,
Mhm.
um, are saying, hey, we want to republish your links in our newspaper and we will pay you for that. And that's great, you know what I mean? And it's not a significant enough amount of money. you know what I mean? It's money and I'm grateful for it, right? But it's not like,
Yeah, it's not recouping the cost even for the project. And like I said, my project is nothing like your project, okay? And it costs me, and I do it because I love it. But that's part of the reason why I had to start really thinking about what it was when I realized it wasn't what I had wanted it to be, right? I had a great conversation with someone the other day, and she was asking me, she was like, tell me, tell me why you started your podcast. And I was telling her the story of why I started the podcast. And because I had wanted to start a Black publishing company for joyful stories. Like that had always been my intention. And I think, I probably have spoken about this before, so. And the whole aim of creating, it wasn't even supposed to be a podcast. It was supposed to be a space where I could share the joyful work of Black writers, content creators, whatever. And so I created this website, which literally nobody goes to, writingblackjoy.com if you're interested. But I created the whole website. I was sharing people's work because I was like, I was trying to create a small version of the publishing company. So in my mind, I'm like, publishing company, you're sharing people's work. What would this look like? I create this website. And then I wanted to just create a short about the author piece. So I came up with these 5 questions, and then I sent them. And then I was like, yeah, let's just record them over Zoom. And then I was like, oh, that was fun. And that's how it turned into what it was. But I also got the idea around the same time, I'm like, yeah, let me try and use this to market my business. And because my business is about writing and the podcast called Writing Black Joy, I think I tried to get it to do double duty, and it didn't work for me. Now, there was a part of me that felt like I wished that I could make it work. And there's another part of me that realized that I liked it the way I kind of liked what it was. And so I'm still kind of reconciling that in my own mind, because it's hard. It's hard when you're creating content for your business, and you have this whole other thing that you're doing that you're really enjoying, that's meaningful, that is important work. And you're trying to feel like, how can I do this and also run this business, and I think that's it's just worth acknowledging that it's not easy. And I really I'm rooting for you to find a way, because if you find a way, maybe I'll find a way. But in the meantime, I'm okay with mine as it is. But I love that you're sort of looking for the through line, because I think it will come when you find the through line. Do you think, because you talked about it being aimed at young people, and then you talked about having older people attend the live shows, how can I put this? When you create it, do you create it with that audience in mind, or are you just like, we're just going to tell these stories and they're for whoever comes along?
Yeah, it's more like that. It's more about allowing the and elder, that has been a whole conversation. People over 60, Black folks over 60, really get positional over the title elder and who gets to be an elder, and particularly who gets to be an elder in a society where we're hunted as people, right? So if you don't make it to 60, which I'm being told is not an elder on one hand, and then on another hand, how dare you say that someone who has made it to 60 in the society where you can be where you can be murdered or just die because of white supremacy, right? Like medical racism. There's all the ways that systemic racism killed us earlier, right? So if you make it to 60 and then you're not considered an elder, that feels like a slap. But then folks who have made it to 70 are like, oh no, that 10 years is where you go from, okay, my kids are well out of the house, I'm, I might still be full on in my career at 61, right? Whereas at 70, I have exited, I've retired, I'm now looking at all of my grandkids and looking at my legacy, and you know what I mean? So all these things, right? I'm sorry, what was your original question?
No, that's okay. So you were talking about the sort of almost the sort of, I don't even know what word to use, but how people view the word elder, and how how that sort of feeds into the stories that they tell, and also the audience and
Right.
how you sort of create it for the audience that you create it for.
Right. So I really, and the filmmaker that I've connected with, who is just like, let me just take a moment to speak about Michael B. Maine, the filmmaker.
Please
So,
do.
um, so I had a couple of people that I was considering prior to Michael. In fact, I had one person that helped me do all the budgeting, right? And as we got closer to the project, some things happened where I was like, okay, so this is not the best person for me in
Mm,
this project. I need to find someone who is a good match for me personally. And not
yeah,
that they're not fantastic in
yeah,
every other
but
area, but I was like,
it's a good fit thing, right?
it's
Like,
not a good fit, right? For me, right? Not even for the project, but for me, it wasn't a good fit. And then I, found another person. I was like, nah. And I was like, I just need a weekend to kind of think about it. And in that weekend that I was thinking about it, I was on this Black camping trip where it was being documented. And, and this guy, Michael B. Maine, took a picture of me on the trail and he was like, hey, Nacala, check this picture out. And I looked at it and I was like, stunned. I was like, this is so gorgeous. And it was just me sitting on a log, right? It was me sitting on a log. And I was like, oh, but the composition was gorgeous. And the way the softening of the trees behind me that he did, I was just like, this is gorgeous. And I was like, yo, I know that you don't have time for this. And it's probably not something that you're into, but would you be down to collaborate with me on this project? And he was like, yeah, that would be amazing. And so then I was just in the right place at the right time to reconnect with somebody who I met before but didn't know really all the scope of their work. So he is really, he always, like, when we were first getting to know each other through working on this project, he was like, I'm really a human and humanity first person. So if we have a call about business stuff, I'm really interested in knowing about how's your day and how are you as a person
mm,
before I'm interested in talking about what you need from this project, or the information that I need to relay to you about this project. And it was such a beautiful way to frame this this collaboration in terms of like, how do we show up to these elders' homes?
oh,
Like we go,
can I tell you a story?
yeah,
When I went to Tanzania, I was at the time I was working in the UK, which I am actually doing again. Um,
mm-hmm,
and at the time I was working in the UK, but I had gone to Tanzania and I worked with an organization out there for quite a few months. And one of the things that struck me was when you go to someone's house, there's this whole like rich. I actually wrote a whole blog post about like the those greeting rituals, because it was just like coming from a kind of almost like a not necessarily fast pace, but like a very like environment. Anybody who's not watching it probably wonders what I was just doing. So just like a very succinct, you're thinking about things in a really sort of um economy of time sort of thing, right? Way. It was interesting to get there and like you come to somebody's house, and I don't care if you came to do business, I don't care if you came to work, I don't care if whatever. It's like you come and it's like, welcome, you're welcome. There's this whole set of things that you have to say. It takes a couple of minutes. You don't have to, but that's like their culture. Um, and I really enjoyed it. I like the idea that no matter why you're here, like before we begin, like, I want to welcome you into this space. I want you to feel as if you've been welcomed into this space. I want you to tell me about how you're doing. And that sort of exchange. And I like that it still exists, in certain places.
I mean, so we're both African American, and it's wild that it exists here. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And it's very, because we time is money. Like, that's what you grow up learning here. Time is
Yeah.
money, and it really is pretty much everywhere. I mean, like in the society here, right? And so like having someone that forces me to reflect and kind of live out my values through this project. Because
Mm.
really, values wise, yeah, I am absolutely person first. And I'm like, this hour of your time and my time
Yeah. But
needs to make some money since
yeah, but
project ain't
also
making it.
No, but also you might be thinking about it from that person's perspective. Like that's the thing I liked about it. Like for me, I'm okay to, I talk a lot. So I'm like, yeah, an hour and 10 of my time isn't as critical to me. But I'm like, this person's on the clock. Like I'm also thinking about their time as well. So it's nice to almost get that permission, like, oh, by the way, yes, we're on the clock, but also like in this space, we are two people. And it's something I've been thinking about a lot recently because I work at university now, and
Mm.
we've been having a lot of conversations about this is kind of off base, right? But we've been having a lot of conversations about the scientific method and research, and the idea of objectivity around it. And I'm like, these are human beings. I think objectivity is either a myth in this circumstance, or it is another standard that you're trying to hold people to, where
Well,
they kind of leave their humanity at the door and they come into this space without it. And how it, I first of all, I don't think anybody's actually doing that. I think you're just making it up in your mind that people are doing it. But secondly, like, the fact that you even have that as an expectation is wild to me. Like, so it's something I've been thinking about a lot over the last even couple of weeks.
well, and I think is important to point out that objectivity is relative to the information that you have, because you don't
100%.
understand, so like, and like, in not naming whiteness and white supremacy, we default to whiteness as the blank slate, and so then when people say, well, culturally, and you know what I mean, like there are different cultural perspectives to
Yes.
what you are saying is so objective,
Yes.
and 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 they're not realizing that there's like that they're actually bringing an entire worldview
Yes.
that's not objective.
That's not objective. And I think that to me is the thing about um I don't even know, like it is white supremacy, but I think a part of it is not realizing like that too is a system, right? It is a
Right.
cultural set of
Yes.
beliefs that you have.
Yes.
You think it's objective, but it's actually
Yes.
just a cultural set of beliefs. If you went to India, there's
Yes.
a different cultural set of
That.
beliefs. If you went to Barbados, there's a different set of cultural beliefs. If you went to, you know, Indonesia, there's a different set of cultural beliefs. And because I travel a lot, that's why I pause to say that objectivity is about white supremacy. I think it's just an idea that when you come into this place, the sort of experience of the sort of cultural norm is what's considered to be objective. Um,
Right.
we happen to be, I'm in the UK, you're in the US, and there's this idea, but also, growing up in Barbados, ex-colony, I feel like those ideas have also gone over, to places which would have been colonized, this idea of, and I it's complicated for me because I like some of those ideas, right? So it's a bit complicated for me, but also just remember, as you said, that like what you're calling objectivity is actually just your worldview, right? And if you remember that, then it'll be a lot easier for you to realize that other people are in this space with their worldview, and the only way for this to work is to make space for that, and set up the container so that we can move forward in a way that actually is win-win and beneficial.
Yeah.
So I totally agree with that. Now I've totally forgotten where we were in the conversation, but that is completely not important.
I actually remember, though.
Oh,
I
good. I
actually
was going to say,
remember.
you were
So
talking
you
about
were
you're a filmmaker,
asking. So you were asking me
about
if
the
I
audience.
just if I'm targeting the story, if I'm guiding the story to a particular place. And so
Mhm.
I brought in Michael because of his humanity and human first piece, because he just lets folks talk. So I let folks talk. Like I have 5 questions. That is, How did you experience joy as a child? How did you experience joy in your 20s and 30s? How do you experience joy now? Um, what advice would you give to the community about joy? And what advice would you give to children specifically about joy? Those are
Oh,
my 5 questions. And these are grown people who have lived an entire life. So there's stories about drug use, there's stories about, all the different things, right? All the different things that, like, so one of the elders was talking about how, he spent a lot of time in his 20s and 30s studying sexuality and spirituality. And I was like, yeah, knowing you as a person, I can see how those things you
shape.
know, have shaped who you are. And I really appreciate it. So yeah, it's not, I feel like all of that is valuable for young people to hear because
Hmm.
it's all of the things that they will encounter, whether it is saying yes or no to different, drug experiences or sexual experiences or academic or spiritual experiences, right? Or travel
Yeah,
experiences, cultural experiences. Like it's all a part of life. So I don't, I ask those 5 questions and allow them to share and fill in as they wish.
I love that. I love that. So I'm curious, how difficult, and this is just more of the logistic side of things. How difficult or easy has it been? I know you said you applied for grants, and obviously then you have, booking and, meeting the people who you're going to feature and all of that. Like, how 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 much of it did you know before? How much of it have you learned on the go? Like, how has it been bringing this project together?
It's been wild because I don't like tech stuff. I don't know. It's so difficult for me. Um, and just even not knowing what I didn't know. So
Mm,
like I promised a lot of things in these grants that I was like, I have no idea how to do it. And because Michael loves the project, he has volunteered a lot of time
mm,
and which I'm so grateful for. And it's like I don't know how to repay somebody
mhm.
who sees your vision and is like, I'm gonna throw down on your vision with my time and my talent. And he's super talented. Um, but yeah, he just I've really been fortunate in this project to, one to have connected with him, but also to yeah, I'm just learning all the stuff that I didn't know. Like I didn't know
Mm.
that I didn't know, and I didn't know how much. Even where I was like, okay, I can probably figure that out, or I know somebody who can answer this question. Had no idea how involved it would be. The thing, and my sister is also a coach. She's a diversity, equity, inclusion consultant, and she also does some coaching.
Mhm.
And she was saying that she was like, you really need to delegate the things that you don't do well because where you shine is in your interviews and in the connect and like setting up the pieces. But like, yeah, nobody should be doing. You should don't need to be doing any scheduling. You don't need to be
Yeah.
doing any admin. I was like, yeah,
Mhm.
like those are all things that I'm really bad at and that
Y-
I don't have a desire to learn either,
Yes,
right?
and that's it, right? You can learn anything,
Yeah.
but like, do you actually want to learn that? Um,
Yeah.
but also, I feel that cost pressure. Someone said to me recently about this podcast. They were like, you can hire someone to edit it, and da, 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 da. And I was like, sure, I could. It's already costing me, and part of the reason I learned how to edit audio and video so that I could do it myself. Um,
Right.
and so yeah, it's sometimes it feels like a toss up between, like I said to someone the other day, I almost felt like the vision I had in my mind was being limited by my own talent because there's only so much
Yeah.
I can do, and
Yeah.
I'm not, you know currently I'm not choosing to spend money on it, um to pay somebody who probably would do it in half the time and do it twice as good. Like, if that's not happening, then I almost feel like it's limited by my vision is almost limited by like my website building talent and my audio editing talent, all the things. I get that too, and it's hard, but yeah, I like I like the idea of doing it anyway because I know that like a past version of myself would have not done it because it was so messy. Whereas now I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, do it, see what happens. I learned some stuff. It was good. It's been good. Uh, and doing it that way. So, because I know you recently, not recently, I know that you got awarded uh, to learn more about oral histories, taking oral histories.
Yes.
Tell me all about
Yes.
that.
Oh my gosh. So this project is called, so okay, there's an organization called Wanawari. It's WA and then NA, then WARI. And I think the loose translation, if I recall, is like our home or something like that. It is a home in a historically Black neighborhood that has been in their family, in the founder's family for generations, right? And it went into probate, which is like, okay, I'm trying to make this concise because it's a long story. Anyway, the family, in order to save the home from being returned to the state and being sold to somebody outside the family, they turned it into a cultural center. And so they have gallery exhibitions, they have events, in fact, they hosted two of the viewings of my project,
Nice.
right? And I had been saying to anybody who would listen, I want Wanawari to hold this collection of my joy narratives. So because of gentrification in that historically Black neighborhood, which is no longer very Black, and historically Black meaning there was a time that it was the only place where Black people could buy property,
Mm-hmm.
right? You could not buy property outside of that neighborhood as a Black person at a time, right? And so, um, and now people are realizing that it's a fancy area and it's closer to downtown and they want to live there. And so now Black folks have been pushed out over the last couple of decades. So in order to save this house and keep it there, they have put in all these programs in this house, including a storytelling, an oral history, collection. And so at first it was, stories about, like having Black folks come and share their memories of the Central District
Mm-hmm.
and growing up there and what it was like and all of that. So 2 years ago, they launched this project and the co-founders had been doing, like collecting these stories of Black folks and trying to like make sure that they recorded these stories of people who lived in that area, right? Just one by two, like, they could only, their reach is only so far because it's just two of them. So 2 years ago, they launched this project called the Seattle Black Spatial Histories Institute, which is a way to train Black oral historians on best practices for collecting Black stories.
Okay.
So,
Nice.
and when we think about Black best practices, there's things like, okay, so the people who I recorded my project with, they said, I trust you, Nacala, to be a good steward of my image and my voice and my stories, right? We didn't sign any contracts or anything. So at some point, I'll probably go back and ask them to sign something that protects them in case, I go in a direction that they're really not down with. Because at this point, I have their images, I've been using them with to the best of my ability, right?
Yeah.
But this project, this Spatial Histories Institute, brings in Black oral historians, Black librarians, Black archivists, Black museum curators to teach us the best practices. So we'll learn things around copyright law, getting consent. So not just like, okay, I have consent to film you here, but like, do I have consent to show this, in this city
On
or
social media
nationally on
or
social media?
wherever. Yeah.
Or, can I make money on this? You know what I mean? So there's like all of these questions that I didn't even think to ask. And was she's been a member of the First African Methodist Episcopalian Church, or First AME, for like 40 years she's belonged to this church, right?
Mm-hmm.
The church that she belongs to is, I want to say, is either the or the second oldest church in the Black church in the city.
Mm-hmm.
It's been around for 120 years.
Wow.
120 years. So my program, this program that I'm entering in, would say, so if you're interviewing someone who belongs to a church that's been around for 120 years, find out how that church started, and
Oh,
also how AME started, like African Methodist Episcopalian Church. Like, what is the history? And particularly because I am not Christian and my family is not. I mean, I didn't come from a Christian family, really.
yeah.
I mean, I say really because everybody had Bibles, but nobody went to church and nobody was like, God
You,
said,
yeah, you weren't raised like devout. Mm-hmm.
And I found my first spiritual teacher when I was like 13. So like, and we did have a preacher in the family, but she was more, I would say she's not traditional Christian at all.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So like, I don't recognize the teachings that we came up with as Christian. And we went to church, but it was in the basement of my cousin's house. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It didn't feel like a real church. And so like, I don't identify as Christian at all. So somebody like me who has I don't know the difference between a Methodist and a Baptist. Like, so like, which is very odd for an African American, right?
Kind of. Yeah, I get that. I get that. I went to
Yeah.
Baptist church, so I know exactly
So
what you mean. I grew
So
up.
a better practice would have been to like understand the context that she came from.
Mm,
And and then like lots of stuff came out in the interview, and even though they're all centered around the same five questions, like if I had done research around the church, maybe that would have been a cool thing to add as a question. Or like I could have been thinking about like what else do I want to know about this person in addition to
mhm.
their joy? Or like, maybe I could have asked her how her spirituality influences or
Yeah,
informs her joy,
her joy.
right? So just,
And yeah, I say that because like you probably don't realize this, but I have the same 8 questions that I ask everyone, but they're tailored
yeah.
to the person because different things come up in the conversation. So I totally get what you mean. That's a brilliant idea. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. So like it's a 2-year program and we'll have a bunch of instruction this year. And then and so we have like the first 6 months are like really learning best practices, visiting archives, visiting museums. You know what I mean? We got field trips. And then the next 6 months is identifying folks that we want to interview. And then the next year after that is really formulating the way that we want to present this information to the community. And so, like,
Nice.
this is just going to be so good. And, I love this project because, um, so I have done, I really love the idea of researching and then bringing things back to the community because I grew
Yeah.
up in such a tight community, like where, like I still know the people that I grew up with and, the elders are eldering and, they're still eldering. I can still go to them. Um, but also, so like, so I did a significant amount of family history that I have all the stuff, but I
Mm,
want to compile those things and present to my family our history. Like, because we have
yeah.
history, we have stories that go back to slavery. Like, there's a
Wow.
branch of
That's
my family that escaped
amazing.
from slavery. And so I was like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. I have
Like,
I have a friend. I actually interviewed her last season. My friend Kim. Hey, Kim. And she loves history. She's been looking at her family history back in Barbados, and it's quite difficult. I don't know what it's like in Seattle, but it was quite difficult in Barbados because of how enslaved people's records were kept. I'm using
yeah,
it's very, very much.
yeah,
She found it hard to go back beyond a certain point because obviously people's names might be like there are a million Brathwaites. Okay, so is this person a Brathwaite because they're related to you? Are they a Brathwaite because they were lived on Brathwaite's plantation? Like So there are all
Yeah.
these different things that make it difficult. I'm always really impressed when people are able to go back and trace the history that far back. So I think that's really amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's is similar here, right? Like we
Of
got a lot of
course.
Joneses, we got a lot of Freemans because some folks just took Freeman as their last
Yeah,
name. Got free, you know what I
absolutely.
mean?
Like Morgan
Um,
Freeman, you know?
yeah, like Morgan Freeman, right? And so yeah, and the records, we had census and all that stuff and
Mm.
yeah, and so I don't know, but and Black folks don't trust systems, so like
No, no
you know
surprises there, but
right, no surprise
yeah.
there. I mean, even when we did the census in 2020, I was like not responding to people knocking on my door, and I told my neighbors, "Don't you tell them anything about me," because that's the other thing is that they would go to your next door neighbor or any of your neighbors and be like, "Oh, who lives in that house?" If you were unresponsive. I mean,
Mm.
even like that's how they were instructed to do things. I was like, "Oh, that is crazy,"
Whole
Anyway,
other conversation.
whole other conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like some of those stories, so those stories about like our relatives that our ancestors that fled slavery. My grandmother, like her grandfather was one of those people who fled, and so he was able to tell her the story,
Yeah.
and
Love that.
so yeah.
And I think a lot of cultures still rely a lot on oral histories as well. And so I think it's good to kind of, as you said, think about the best practices around keeping that tradition going, keeping that. To me, I almost see like not well, maybe not this podcast because I haven't had any elders on, but I almost see like things like this is almost like an extension of that oral tradition,
Yeah.
keeping things going. What's been your proudest moment?
Oh, definitely just all of this project, but um I want to say probably like I think one of the proudest moments was that elder, the last elder, Dr. Joy Hardiman, telling me how much she has reflected on her own life and like the future and her years ahead as a result of this project.
Mm,
Um, yeah, yeah. I think just the elders like loving me up like after going through the process, especially some of the ones that were, well, that were skeptical at first.
mm, mm.
You know, the ones that were skeptical and but like hung in there to complete the project.
Yeah,
That feels really good too. And we're just like, whoa, I had no idea it was going to be like this.
I love
You
that.
know? Yeah.
I love that. So you said you have 5 questions that you ask your guests. I want
Hmm.
you to answer one of those questions for me.
Ah,
You get to pick one, any one you like, and I
okay.
want you to answer one of those questions for me. So you
I
tell
will
me
try.
which one you want to answer.
Okay, I will
I'd make you do
answer.
them all if we had the time. We haven't got the time. So let's just pick one. Let's go with that.
So the one I will answer is how I experienced joy in my 20s and 30s.
Tell me.
My 20s and 30s were all about traveling. And so just like, I've never been to a country that doesn't have coastline. I love me a beach. You know what I mean? But like
Yeah.
I went to in my 20s, for my 20th birthday, I went to London. And then I went to Ghana
Hmm.
at 21. Before I went to Guatemala
Hmm.
and then Spain right before Spain and then Kenya and Tanzania.
Hmm.
Um, and climbed Mount Kilimanjaro like right before I turned 30. So like
Ooh.
yeah, so like my 20s I was out of here. Look up and be like, where's Nacala? Nacala is out of here.
Oh, that sounds like my 20s and 30s.
Yeah. So yeah, that's I found a lot of joy through travel, and just being free and navigating a different context, and then also showing up in my own identity, but being perceived in a different context too,
Mm.
you know? So like, so like being a woman in Ghana,
I
way
was,
different than being.
yeah, but I was about to ask, how was your, because I feel like I could have a whole other conversation about being in Tanzania. How was your experience of Ghana or which pick one or all of them? Like,
Okay.
how did you find your experience was in terms of anything, how you're perceived, how you felt about yourself? Like, I'm curious.
Ghana like turned me inside out.
Mm.
Because there was this I immediately felt like home. Like when we got to so like I grew up in a very African centered community. And also my I come from, my family is Pan Africanist, so like they went to Ghana and Togo in the 60s and 70s and lived there for like 8 years. And,
Mm.
they were like, until, stuff got wild and they had to come home, but
Mm-hmm.
like, my grandmother did not plan to come back. Like,
Wow.
and um, so yeah, so I grew up eating African food and being in African, and my mom's a seamstress, so like being in African fabric stores and being in places where things have come from Africa. So, and there's a smell
Yeah.
that, like a West African smell, and it reminds me of incense and like tree bark. I mean, like it's just there is a smell, right? And so, like getting off of the plane and smelling that smell, it felt like, yes, this is where all the things that I grew up around came from. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then, within 20 minutes of landing, like we got hustled. You know what I mean? So like it was like, hey, you filled out your landing. And I don't know why the sister that I was traveling with, we had 3 kids with us, and we had to fill out the landing strips, the landing custom forms, and
Mm-hmm.
she only had a red pen. So we filled all of ours out in red ink, as opposed to like asking for black or blue ink. I don't know why I
Yeah.
didn't think of it. And so, of course, we get there and they're like, hey, these are wrong, but I'll help you, transfer these. Just put $20 in each of the passports. You know what I mean? So like, just that kind of thing. And then it's like, okay, so we already messed up the forms and now we're paying you. Like, are we gonna get in more trouble? But then we had all these kids with us and we're like trying
Mm.
to figure it out. And so,
Yeah.
but yeah, and that was just kind of like my experience there. Like,
Mm.
sister, 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 and then getting hit with a hustle or some kind of intimidation. And then, the family that I went with, they were African American, both of the husband and wife were Black African American. They were like my family. They were like my family. They're both from Seattle, and they were in a domestic violence situation that I was unaware of until we got there. Yeah, and
Gosh.
so that went
Woo.
down, and then I changed my flight to come home early, and then it was like, they lied and said that, she was sick and that they needed me to stay, and you can't leave Africa
Yeah.
this way. And so I stayed. I mean, it was crazy. So it was really beautiful in these ways, and then heartbreaking and
Yeah.
just traumatic and crazy and just.
Isn't that life though? Like, and I think one of the, going back to what we started with, when I started this project, one of the things I've always struggled with is this idea of feeling like people perceive, because I started a project, and you can tell me if this happens to you too, but like I started a project about Black joy. And it seems to give off this idea that I'm trying to hide up stuff, or not hide it up, but like this idea that like it's really important for those traumatic stories to be told, because it is, right? And I get that. And my whole take on it was like, I'm not saying don't tell them. I'm just saying that I don't think it's enough. I don't think it's enough without telling the joyful stories, because then what it does, I feel like it doesn't, it almost does remove your humanity in a way, right? as
Yeah.
from one another and also from the outside world, right? If you have a group of people and you only ever view them as a victim, then you might feel sorry for them. And this is something, and this is unrelated, but I will say it because I think it's important to say, that I've also recently been thinking about, um, like, I don't even want to call it fundraising, but just this idea that if a community is going through a hard time and you're trying to get eyes on it and maybe raise some funds or whatever, like you're saying, okay, this is, they're suffering, they're having this thing, and it's almost like, how do you? I sometimes feel like it's useful, but like it still removes some of the humanity because people are whole humans. Your experience isn't just the trauma, right? And how, I don't know, it's life, right? It's beautiful and it's heartbreaking. It's all of the things. I always remember me and a friend of mine went to Zanzibar and our luggage got lost, and it was an amazing trip, but also like I walked around in a swimsuit for 2 days, like and like what am I going to remember? What was, like, it's everything. It's a combination of all of those things. And one of my recent guests said something which was just mind blowing to me. She said she writes about, she has a girls magazine. I do not know if that episode is going to be before or after this one, so you're going to have to listen to the whole series. That's what I'm saying. But she writes a girls mag. She's edits a magazine written by young girls, and she writes about rage, right? And I was like, oh wow, what does that have to do with joy? And she's like, because the truth is, you can't selectively numb out an emotion, right? If you start getting to the stage where you don't feel like you can express your rage, like you're not going to be expressing your joy either. Like it's not going to be real. Like you have to be able to express all the parts of yourself. And so I always feel like that is fine. And also that's why the joy part is important too, because everybody's life has like that duality.
Or it has the potential to, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And you can choose to lean into joy, you know, and I think that sometimes we don't, the lack of joy narratives makes it so we don't really think of it as an option.
Yeah. Or as
Yeah.
important, right? As
Or
like,
as a, yeah.
not just that it's not an option, but like that it's, you talked a bit about African Awareness Month, and you mentioned your sister is a DEI coach. And I remember, it happens all the time. Like it's African Awareness Month, or we call it African Awareness Month. It's Black History Month. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Yeah, Black History Month or African Awareness Month or whatever the case may be. And there's a lot of educating, DEI, whatever. That's not my lane, right? But like it absolutely has a place. But sometimes I almost feel like people are so like there's that's important, and this is like frivolous. Like the joy thing is a frivolous thing.
You
Um
know,
and yeah.
I think, so there's a couple of things that come up. One, some people are just not interested in hearing joy stories,
True.
right? And or they've decided, like one of my elders, whom I really love and respect, was like, Joy, oh, I gave up on that a long time ago,
Mm.
right? And I remember my very first event, there was one of my age mates, like we both grew up in this community, and he was like, oh, sister so and so, you should invite her to this project. And it was the same sister that was like, oh, I gave up on joy a long time ago. And I was like, if she would like to do the project, I would love to do the project with her, right? So there's that piece. I think there's the piece about, because white supremacy and anti-blackness are constantly seeking to erase all the horrors that happened. There's something about acknowledging that we have been able to experience joy too, that feels like we're saying that we're okay and we haven't been
Mhm.
scarred by the
Exactly.
damage,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, it's not that. It's also that, like, what kind of life would we be living into if we held on to that and let that be our only story?
Yeah.
Right. And so, or even like, like I think about you talking about only receiving our trauma porn in terms of
Mm-hmm.
stories in Barbados, and that's all you had to read.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's crazy because, like, yeah, some of us didn't have it quite so harsh, and that's okay.
But
You
also,
know?
I feel like there was a certain amount of pride in being able to read stories from the Caribbean. And so when I kind of was like, yeah, I'm not reading that, it was also almost seen that you're rejecting your history. Whereas I'm like, no, I'm not. I where is the rest of it? Like,
Right.
where's the rest of it? That's my thing. Like, no, I don't want to read this. And it so sometimes I feel that again, that like push pull of like I'm not I'm not saying, oh, these stories are terrible. Like that's not what I'm saying. I admire the people who write those things, but I'm like, where's the rest of it? That's what I want to know. Where's the rest of it?
And I'm like, who is it for? You know what I mean? Like, I think
Yeah.
that there's a lot of it that is trying to prove to white people that they did things. Well, and that we hurt, that we're hurting, right?
Yes.
That we're hurting and
And
that we need stuff and that
and I
things are
get
not
that.
fair, right? But like, yeah, like we know, like I don't understand why. Like I've never watched any of the murders of innocent Black folks that like this,
No,
like
I
why
can't.
would I? Why I don't want to watch anybody being killed for 8 minutes and 46 seconds.
Nope.
I know that it happened. I believe that it happened. I don't need to watch it.
Nope.
You know what I mean? And I don't feel like it is dishonoring to George Floyd or his family that I refuse to watch it. I don't think that he would want us to watch it. I don't think he would want us to watch it. He might want people to watch it who don't believe that it happened
Yeah.
or that it happens. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And so
Mm.
I think that that's the other thing is like, what are the things that fortify us
Yeah.
um, to navigate and create happy lives? And do we not
Yeah.
deserve that?
Yeah.
And
And I agree. And also, like, I have this. Um, it may still happen. I kept pushing the date back for various reasons, but I had this project that I wanted to run. Also called Writing Black Joy. Ironically, seems to be the only name I can come up with these days. Uh, but it's a visioning circle because I was like, I feel like it's one thing to be fighting against a system, but at some point you need to be able to envision what you're trying to create. Otherwise, it's going to be so hard to create it, right?
yes,
And
yes,
so just making the space for that, making the space for having those dreams, having those visions, writing them down, and realizing that that is not necessary. We talked earlier about something being frivolous or being a luxury. Like, I don't think, I think that is a luxury that we can ill afford to
yeah,
to leave, right? Because if you don't envision what we're trying to create, we tear this system down, some other nonsense is going to come in its place and we're not even going to realize.
yes,
So
yeah,
I think
100%.
I think that's, to me, that's why the visioning, the dreaming, the joy, the reason those things are important is because we can't create something if we can't picture it. And one of the things that will help us to picture it is to have these stories to kind of be able to sort of look to. So
Oh
that's a
my
part of it
gosh,
for me as
yes.
well. Yeah.
Oh, there's so much good stuff there. So I don't know. I don't know if this is an international organization, but there's a Happiness Research Institute.
I've
Um,
heard of it. Yeah.
huh?
I've heard of
What's
it.
that? Yeah. And so they and it's mostly white folks, which is,
Sure.
really sad. But their statistics, they say that a happy brain is 31% more productive, 37% better at sales, and 3 times more creative than a brain that's negative, neutral, or stressed. They say that happy doctors make 19% fewer medical
Fewer
errors.
mistakes, better decisions every time. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And so there are real life benefits to being joy. And I think that part of oppressive systems part of the negative impact is them taking that benefit away.
Mm,
And so it then becomes, like it, as opposed to this idea that it's frivolous to be joyful, it actually can become a tool for liberation. Um,
absolutely. Agree.
and I think that, like you said, like where what is the point of the struggle? If joy isn't one of the outcomes that we're looking for, then what are we actually looking for? Are we looking for the right to be able to continue to struggle? You know what I mean?
Mm. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And, I wonder about that sometimes. I think sometimes I was saying, I don't know if you know Erin Corinne.
Yeah,
I really
yeah.
hope, I'm hoping that I'm saying her name in the hopes that she and I get a chance to record for this season because
Oh,
she's in an
yeah.
awesome museum. She's also an amazing coach, etc., etc. And she and I talked a bit, and she's over on LinkedIn, by the way. I'll drop her link in the comments, and then
Yeah.
it's in the show notes. I'm going to check her out. But she was talking about lateral violence. This is a series that she's doing on lateral violence. And one of the things I said, I think sometimes part of the problem is I'm not sure that everybody's working for the same thing. I think for some people, success isn't necessarily removing the system, it's just being on top. And so
Yes.
it's a
Yes.
hard, it's, but that's why I like the idea of doing the visioning, because to me,
Yeah.
I feel like we need to be able to envision the world that we want to create and not just try to recreate it with different parameters.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. It's so real. It
yeah.
is so
So,
real.
thank you so much for answering your own question. I absolutely love that. And tell us a bit more about your coaching since we're about to wrap up. Tell us a bit more about your coaching, who it's for, and yeah, tell us some more about that.
Okay. So my coaching practice is for Black and Brown folks who are ready to really, really work from the place of their personal magic, right? Is for folks who are like, yeah, I'm tired of being unfulfilled, and or like, I know that, just as an example, I know that I am a phenomenal teacher. I work really well with this age group, but this school system that I work for is trash. And I
Mm,
want to be able to take my gifts and talents and make money and do something that is in better alignment with my values, where I still get to use my magic. Or, yeah, someone who's, I mean, like I'm, I really want folks who are ready to take steps toward change and want some support to kind of like thought partnership to kind of flesh out and get clear about the steps that they want to take, and then want to have that support, accountability, and cheerleading along the way.
mhm,
uh, and then and that are and folks who are willing to be self-reflective and
mm,
curious.
yeah, and
I love working with artists. I love working with folks that are into social enterprise, folks who you know are looking at, what I mean, folks who want some support to make that change that will take them to the next level.
yeah, and who are about to take some action because I'm sure you will crack that whip. But
I don't
it's
crack
nice in a
whips.
lovely way. I know. I'm sorry. I'm not being fair. No,
No,
it's
it's okay.
I'm not being fair. Who yeah, but who's ready to sort of move towards their goals?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I hate that expression. I don't know why I said
You
it.
know, those things are so embedded. Like, we did a lot of work in the filming of these narratives. Michael's really good at this about, because I kept saying I want people to be captured beautifully, and he serves on a board for an organization that deals with sex trafficking, and
Hmm.
so he's like, captured. I don't capture people.
Oh yeah. And language is such a an important thing as well. That's this. Oh, we'll start a whole nother conversation. So I will leave it there. But
Okay.
thank you so much for joining me. This has been so much fun.
Oh, no problem. And folks can catch me at joyfulpractices.info and, schedule a free 15-minute session.
Yeah, go and
And
find Nacala.
yeah, find me. And, I'm international. So I'm on these online streets. So y'all can get me from wherever you are in the world. Just book an
Right.
appointment and we'll make it happen.
100%. 100%.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So thanks so much, Nacala. And thanks for joining me, everyone else.
Thank you so much, Sophia.
Thank you for joining us today. You can find out more about our guests in the notes below, and don't forget to hit subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss new episodes when they drop. And if this has inspired you to get your own writing project into the world, click on my website below and learn how you can work with me as a writing coach or an editor. Until next time, I send you big love from a small island.